Today we'll start our study of fingerprints. You will probably need to watch this presentation more than once, and you'll need to take some time and really compare it to the websites because this is packed with information. Where would we find fingerprints? Well, just about anywhere. Pathways, objects, items that have been destroyed at a crime scene, items that are left at a scene. Again, they'd be found just about anywhere. There's three facts about fingerprints that make them real special. One is that they're formed during fetal life and they remain unchanged. Fingerprints are unique, which means that no one else in the world is going to have a fingerprint just like you. They might have a similar fingerprint, but not exactly like you. And they can be classified systematically because of the pattern of friction ridges. And those friction ridges are also present on the fingers, the palms, and the toes. So we can take prints other than just the fingertips. Here's where it starts to get complicated. There's three basic patterns: arches, loops, and whorls. That sounds easy enough. But the three basic patterns are subdivided into 8 types. Arches have plain and tented arches. Loops have ulnar and radial loops. And whorls have a plain whorl, a central pocket loop whorl, and a double loop whorl, and an accidental loop whorl. So it gets really crazy when you're trying to look at fingerprints to decide exactly what type it is. It takes years of practice. We'll walk through each type of fingerprint just so that you have an idea. A plain arch is probably the simplest. The ridges flow from one side of the finger to the other with no sharp angles, okay, no angles of 90 degrees or less. The ridges that double back and go out the same side from which they entered are not present in a plain arch, okay? It goes from one side of the finger to the other. And up-thrusting ridges that do not follow the general flow of the ridges are also not present. So it's just a smooth, gentle flow for a plain arch. And that makes it nice and easy. Now a tented arch is a little bit different. The smooth flow of the ridge from one side to the other is interrupted by a ridge forming an angle of 90 degrees or less by an up-thrusting ridge that doesn't follow the general flow of the ridges. So it looks sort of like a tent. It's not a smooth flow. Loops must have one and only one delta. Now for a delta, think about a delta in a river, and it's the same idea. A ridge that goes out or tends to go out the same side from which it entered. In other words, it loops around. And at least one ridge that crosses a line drawn between the core and the delta. So again, that's real specific to be able to tell what type of fingerprint it is. Whorls, we start getting a little bit more complicated. They're any pattern that possess 2 or more deltas with a doubling back, also known as a recurve, in front of each that is not broken by a ridge or delta. Like I said, it starts to get more complicated here. Again, there's 4 types of whorls. There's a plain, a central pocket, a double loop, and an accidental. The plain whorl is the simplest. It has 2 deltas with at least one ridge that forms a complete circuit and passes in front of both deltas. Again, remember, deltas are like you see in a river, and the ridges may be broken, or a number of short ridges that are taken together form a complete circuit. Now a central pocket whorl, if a line is drawn between the deltas, does not cross or touch a ridge that is inside the type of lines of the delta near the core. One delta appears to be closer to the center of the pattern than the other, sort of like a pocket. And again, this is something where you will need to take the information from this presentation, look at the pictures on the website, especially the thin blue line, and really compare what it's saying on the website, what I'm saying, look at the pictures, and see if you can work through this. It will take you some time. An accidental whorl is kind of crazy. There's a lot of different things going on. The pattern has 3 or more deltas. It could have all the characteristics of 2 or more different pattern types, except for a plain arch. It could be a whorl with 3 deltas, could be a combination of a loop and a whorl, could be a combination of a loop and a tented arch. In other words, it looks sort of like a jumble on the fingertips. Now, a double loop whorl is a combination of two distinct loop patterns. It has two deltas and two separate and distinct loops. So now let's talk about the types of prints there are that we can collect. There's visible, there's plastic, and there's latent. And those can be negative or positive prints. And that would be the way they show themselves and also what we can do to develop them. To develop latent prints, we can use oblique lighting. Now, oblique means from the side. That's why sometimes when you see the actors on CSI with their little flashlights and they're showing them from the side rather than shining them straight down, they're doing that because they're looking for prints. It makes the print visible. We can also use powder, and there's magnetic powder, non-magnetic powder, and fluorescent powder. Now, this is a picture supplied by our Michigan State Police, and it is magnetic powder being used to raise what looks like a footprint, but you can do the same thing with fingerprints. Now, in this picture, also supplied by the Michigan State Police, they are dusting for prints with black powder. Powder comes in a lot of different colors, and of course it would depend on the type of surface, the type of lighting, the type of print, what sort of dusting powder a tech would decide to use. To develop latent prints, we can brush on, blow on, or pour on the different powders. There's also different types of brushes. There's fiberglass brushes, carbon filament, camel hair, feather. Not all brushes are the same, and if any of you are artists, you understand that different brushes are used for different things. There are some chemical methods used to develop prints, and they would be used when prints are on absorbent surfaces. In other words, the print sort of soaked in. And ninhydrin, silver nitrate, iodine fuming, cyanoacrylate, and amido blacks are all chemical methods. And you may have heard these talked about on CSI or Bones or Law and Order, Criminal Intent, any of those programs. They talk about these different methods for developing latent prints. So once we've done all that, we have to photograph the print with a ruler. And remember, we always want to have something to show us the size, so a ruler is probably the best. If an object is small and we've developed prints at a scene, we can take that object back to the lab. If it's not, such as if it's a wall or a door, it's not easily carried back, that's when we're going to just photograph with a ruler. We avoid wrapping in paper, cloth, or plastic bags. We don't want to smear the print. We want an item wedged in a strong box. Again, we don't want it to be smeared. And if it's on an immovable object, then we use lifting tape. And again, that would be something like a wall, a door, a car. Well, a car, actually, they can take back to the lab. But we would use lifting tape, and we would place that lifting tape on cards. Now, to individualize, first the pattern is determined. And now is when it gets very, very detailed. The fingerprint technician would look for individual ridge characteristics called minutiae, and they want 8 to 16 points of comparison for a match. This is a listing of the types of minutiae. I'm going to walk through them and sort of explain what each one looks like. Now imagine trying to look at this with just a magnifying glass. A bifurcation looks sort of like a fork, okay, with just 2 prongs. An island is simple enough. It looks like a bubble or an enclosed area. And a dot looks like what you'd think, like a dot. A short ridge is relatively short compared to what other ridges would be. And then there's a ridge ending, and that would be a point where a ridge ends. A trifurcation looks sort of like a pitchfork with 3 prongs. So tri, 3 prongs, bi, 2 prongs. A bridge looks just like a bridge. It's a line that reaches across 2 other lines. An angle looks like a sharp angle. There are converging ridges, and they look like 2 or more ridges coming together, and diverging ridges, which is 2 or more ridges moving apart. Now this sounds simple, but imagine trying to look at this all in one fingerprint. Identifying fingerprints without the help of a computer can certainly be very time-consuming and not really efficient. Can you imagine trying to compare all those different patterns with nothing other than a magnifying glass? And that is how it was done for many years, and also why many criminals got away. Now these are all different types of prints, and later on in this section you'll be asked to compare these. But imagine trying to pick out these details only knowing what you know now. It will take some time, and if you have excellent vision, of course, it would help. But if you enjoy looking closely at details, this could be an area for you, because even with a computer, we still need to be able to look at the prints. The Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or AFIS, is what you often hear about on all the TV cop shows. Prior to AFIS, manual methods used based on a 10-finger system were what we did on a regular basis. And there was no real centralized system, so there were fingerprint cards all over. All the different local police agencies would have fingerprint cards. And again, that was why criminals could get away. This has been really packed with information. It's probably going to be necessary to listen to it several times and then to compare it with the website descriptions of the fingerprints. Take your time and enjoy.